Solving quadratics by factoring. Zero product principle. A times B equals 0. Either A, B, or both must be 0. So, x minus A and x minus B equals 0. Either x minus A equals 0 and or x minus B equals 0. So, we are going to set each factor equal to 0. So x minus 3 equals 0 and 2x plus 1 equals 0 and solve. So add 3 to both sides, subtract 1 from both sides, so x equals 3 and 2x equals negative 1. So divide 2 by both sides, so x equals 3 and x equals negative 1/2. Okay, so for this one we're going to set all three terms equal to 0. So x equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0, and solve. So subtract 1 from both sides, and add 5 from both sides. So x equals 0, and x equals negative 1, and x equals 5. Steps for solving. Get quadratic into standard form. Everything on one side set equal to 0. Factor polynomial. Make t-chart setting each factor equal to 0. Solve each equation. Okay, so our first example here is already in standard form. X squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. So my next step is to factor the polynomial. So remember, we need to find two numbers that multiply together to equal 6 but add together to equal 5. So negative 2 and negative 3. Okay, so now I'm going to set each one of those equal to 0 and solve. So x equals 2 and x equals 3. Okay, for this next one, it's a binomial, so remember that this is basically like x squared plus 0x minus 9. So I need to find two numbers that multiply together to equal negative 9, but add together to equal 0. So 3 and 3. So x minus 3 and x plus 3. Set each equal to 0 and solve. So x equals 3 and x equals negative 3. Okay, so I need to get this first one in standard form, so I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. So x squared minus 14x minus 15 equals 0. Now I need to find two numbers that multiply together to equal negative 15, but add together to equal negative 14, so 1 and 15. So x plus 1 and x minus 15 equals 0. So set each equal to 0 and solve. So x equals negative 1 and x equals 15. Okay, so I'm going to get this equation into standard form. So I'm going to do that by adding 4x and subtracting 12. So 5x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. Remember, we want a to be positive. Now I'm going to factor the polynomial. So for this one, I have an a, so remember, we multiply a times c. So 5 times 12, which is 60, and then replace a with 1 and c with 60. Then I'm going to find two numbers that multiply together to equal 60, or negative 60, and add together to equal 4. So 6 and 10. So x minus 6 and x plus 10 equals 0. Now I need to bring down my a. So x minus 6 over 5 and x plus 10 over 5. Reduce and move the a. So 5x minus 6 and 6x plus 2 equals 0. Set each equal to 0. So 5x minus 6 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. Add 6 to both sides and subtract 2 from both sides. So 5x equals 6 and x equals negative 2. Divide by 5. So x equals 5 over 6 and x equals negative 2. Okay, so this one is already in standard form, but I have a GCF of 2x, so I can factor out the GCF. So 2x, parentheses, 4x minus 9 equals 0. Then set each equal to 0. So 2x equals 0 and 4x minus 9 equals 0. Divide by 2 and add 9 to both sides. So x equals 0 and 4x equals 9. Now I need to divide by 4. So x equals 0 and x equals 9 over 4. Okay, so for this one I can factor out an x. So this becomes 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. Now I need to multiply a times c. So 2 times 3, which is 6, and replace the c with that number and a with 1. So now I need to find two numbers that multiply together to equal 6, but add together to equal 7. So 1 and 6. I'm going to now bring down my a, 2. Reduce and bring the a to the front. So x, parentheses x, 2x plus 1 and x plus 3 equals 0. Now I need to set all three terms equal to 0. So x equals 0, 2x plus 1 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. Now I need to solve each equation. So my final answer, x equals 0, x equals negative 1/2, and x equals negative 3. Okay, so I can factor out a 2 from this equation. Then I can solve by grouping. So remember, we grouped the first two terms and the second two terms. Now I need to factor out my GCF. So I can factor out a 2x from this side and a 2 from this side. And then remember, we keep the outside and we keep one of the insides. So this becomes 2 parentheses x squared plus 2 plus, or times, x minus 1 equals 0. So now I need to divide by 2. I divide by 2. So I get x squared plus 2x, x minus 1 equals 0. Now I need to set each equal to 0. So this becomes x squared plus 2x equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. Now I need to subtract 2 from both sides and add 1 from both sides. So x squared minus 2, x squared equals negative 2 and x equals 1. So I will solve this one by square root. Uh-oh, you can't square root a negative number. So this is no solution. So this equation only has one solution, x equals 1. So x equals 1 is the only number that would substitute into x and solve. So x equals 1 is our solution. Okay, so I can factor out an x, 2x. So then I get 2x parentheses 2x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. Then I need to multiply a times c, so 2 times negative 6 and get negative 12. So now I need to find two numbers and multiply together to equal negative 12, but add together to equal positive 1, so 3 and 4. So 2x parentheses x minus 3, x minus 4 equals 0. So I need to bring down my a. Reduce and solve. So 2x parentheses 2x minus 3, and x plus 2 equals 0. Now I need to set each term equal to 0, so 2x equals 0, 2x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 1 equals 0. Now I need to solve each equation. So the first one I will divide by 2, the next one I will add 3, and subtract 2 for the last one. So x equals 0, 2x equals 3, and x equals negative 2. My middle one I still need to solve some more, so I'm going to divide by 2. So my final answer is x equals 0, x equals 3 over 2, and x equals negative 2. Okay, word problems. You want to put a rectangle garden with an area of 800 feet. The width of the garden is x feet and the length is 6 minus x feet. Find the dimensions of the garden. Okay, so remember that our area is length times width or width times length. So x times 6d minus x equals 800. So I'm going to distribute my x. So x times 60 is 60x and x times x is x squared. Now I need to get my equation into standard form. So I'm going to subtract 60x and add x squared to both sides. So in standard form, x squared minus 60x plus 800 equals 0. Now I need to factor the polynomial. So I need to find two numbers that multiply together to equal 800 but add together to equal 60. So negative 20 and negative 40. So x minus 20 and x minus 40 are my factors. So I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So x minus 20 equals 0 and x minus 40 equals 0. So x equals 20 and x equals 40. Now I need to substitute 20 and 40 both into both equations. So my width would be x, so I'm going to substitute that in for 20 in, and so x equals 20. My length is 60 minus x, substitute 20 in for x, so 60 minus 20, which is 40. So in this case, my width would be 20 and my length would be 40. Or I can substitute in my 40 for x. So my width would be 40 and my length would be 20. Okay, let's try another word problem. You have made a 4 by 5 feet quilt. You want to put a decorative border of uniform width around the outside using 10 square feet of fabric remaining. What should the width of the border be? Okay, so I did a little picture here. So this is our quilt as 4 by 5, and this is my decorative border, which is the unknown distance of x. So my length times width, so my length in this case would be x plus 4 plus x, and my width would be x plus 5 plus x, or 2x plus 4 and 2x plus 5. And then my area is 4 by 5. This part here is 20, plus I have 10 square feet, so 30 square feet. Now I need to FOIL. So 2x times 2x is 4x squared. And 2x times 5 is 10x, and 4 times 2x is 8x, so 18x, and 4 times 5 is 20. Now I need to get it into standard form, so I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides. So 4x squared plus 10x minus 10 equals 0. Now I can factor out a 2. Okay, so once I've factored out a 2, I get 2, parentheses, 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. Now I need to multiply a times c. So 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. So now I need to find two numbers that multiply together to equal negative 10, but add together to equal 9. So negative 1 and 10. Now I need to bring down my a. Reduce. So 2, parentheses, 2x minus 1, and x plus 5 equals 0. Now I need to divide by 2. So 2x minus 1 and x plus 5 equals 0. And now I need to set each term equal to 0. So 2x minus 1 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. Now I'm going to solve. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides and subtract 5 from both sides of my other equation. So 2x equals 1 and x equals negative 5. Now I'm going to divide by 2. So x equals 1/2 and x equals negative 5. Can I have a negative amount of feet? No. So that cannot be an answer. So my answer is 1/2 a foot.